Hello, I'm Philip Myers of PEMI Engineering and Consulting. We provide engineering services to the oil and gas industry. This video might be interesting for those considering committee work such as for the American Petroleum Institute, API, ASTM, the National Fire Protection Association or NFPA, or any others. Here I'm going to give you a taste of committee work and how standards evolve with a personal example with our work for the API COPM meeting. COPM stands for Committee on Petroleum Equipment. COPM meets twice a year, and the spring 2024 meeting was held last week from March 10th to March 15th. There are many dozens of subgroups within API. Most have to do with measuring the amount of fuel or petroleum transferred from one party to another, referred to as custody transfer. Currently, I am on the Committee on Evaporation Loss Emissions, or CELE, and the COPL, Committee on Manual Tank Measurement, or Calibration. At this particular meeting, I gave a short talk about standards development, which makes a small improvement out of the many such improvements going on all the time on committee work. As is usual for me, the trip starts out with a trip to the San Francisco airport. I always try to see if I can perceive the tilt of the Millennium Tower, but it's too small to see, especially in a car. Naturally, the next thing to do is get on a plane and get to your destination. After arriving in Dallas, I passed by the Hilton Anatoly Hotel, where API has meetings quite frequently, maybe every 5 or 6 years. It's a very nice place. Also, it's huge. That's one of the constraints that API has when setting up reservations. There are usually 400 to 600 attendees, so the hotel has to be big, and of course, all committee people, and everyone else for that matter, likes to stay in really nice places. When you are late for making reservations, as I was, the prices for the hotels become ridiculous. So I had to find a more economic place on Commerce Street. Near the hotel was a AT&T display center. They just had a huge display, and you can see there were a lot of people interested in looking at the lights. Here's a shot looking down Commerce Street as the sun is setting. Early Monday morning, I went to the meeting hotel, the Hyatt Regency in Dallas. It's quite characteristic, and it also is probably the most frequently used Dallas hotel by API. For my talk, I got to the lobby ridiculously early, 5 a.m., and I was still on Pacific time, so that was pretty early even for me. I'm making my way over to the lobby and to the API registration. Because it's early, no one's at the registration desk yet. At the beginning of API meetings, there's usually a breakfast in a huge ballroom like this. Here I am up at the podium giving a speech to 300 or 400 people. It's quite nerve-wracking, as you can imagine, but I survived and the talk went well. The talk will be presented next. Hello, this is Phil Myers. I'm not sure exactly how or why I was selected to do this talk, but no matter. I am honored to speak to a group of professionals like yourselves who have developed the best petroleum measurement standards in the world. I would also like to thank one of my mentors, the late Dan Comstock, for encouraging me to look at volume expansion in a tank caused by pressure head in the tank. And of course, I want to thank API and all those who make this kind of knowledge sharing possible. So let's get on with the show. The topic of today is about manual calibration of vertical cylindrical tanks. Note that this standard is nearly 30 years old without any changes. That's of concern, as you'll see. One of the important tools used in constructing the Egyptian pyramids thousands of years ago was the royal cubit, an ancient tape measure used by ancient engineers in the days of yore. The Egyptian pyramids are accurate to within 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15 of 1 degree when aligned along the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west. So I ask you, did standards help? 40 feet under Gaithersburg, Maryland, is a vault that requires 3 different keys to get into. What's in there? The vault has a collection of tiny metal cylinders that define the mass of everything in this country. The vault belongs to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, better known as NIST. The insets on the right show a copy of the original International Bureau of Weights and Measures kept at Sèvres, France since 1889. It is called the International Prototype Kilogram. Its nickname is Big K. Copies of it are used all over the world to calibrate scales. The problem is that Big K lost 50 micrograms since it was created, and therefore the mass of a kilogram has changed and scientific chaos ensues. But all this changed as of May 20th, 2019. The new system is based on Planck's constant. The Kibble balance measures the downward pull of gravitational force on a mass by counteracting it with an upward electromagnetic force. The same kind of standards evolution has occurred with the meter. Originally, it was the length of a bar at the Bureau of Weights and Measures. Now it is defined in terms of the speed of light in a vacuum. Incidentally, 4 of the 7 SI base units were redefined in 2019: the kilogram, ampere, Kelvin, and mole. The Kelvin is defined by the Boltzmann constant instead of the triple point of water, and the mole now defined by Avogadro's constant. This is a good example of why API standards have to be reviewed every 5 years. A de facto standard is a standard that is widely accepted and used but lacks formal approval by a recognized standards developing organization. De facto standards can result from marketplace dominance or practice. You are all familiar with the QWERTY keyboard. This is an example of a de facto standard. Even though the keyboard is not the most efficient arrangement of keys that there is, it has been used so widely that it is now the de facto standard for keyboard layouts. And Windows, of course, sets a de facto standard for graphical user interfaces, or GUIs. Here is an ad for juice marketed to children. Note that it says 100% juice. Ads for juice aimed at children all use this de facto standard, quote, 100% juice, whether or not the product is healthy. My point in this life cycle is that not updating 2.2a for 30 years has caused the standard to become de facto. There aren't any tank calibrators that I know of that follow it 100%. They use bits and pieces of it as needed and discard or substitute other parts of it. So the standard is not really being followed and fails to function as a standard should. I am postulating that without revision, Chapter 2.2a, that is manual tank calibration, is becoming a de facto standard, and 2.2a is fading in its role as a standard. The goal of 2.2a is to end up with a tank calibration chart or strapping chart that looks like the one here, which is copied from the standard. It provides the volume as a function of incremental liquid height. This is required where custody transfer for petroleum liquids is taking place. Naturally, when you buy fuel, you want to know whether you got the right amount according to a standard. Owners often want calibrated tanks, even if the purpose is not for custody transfer, because they can do inventory reconciliation or audit for stock loss or fuel theft. What's the big picture of Chapter 2.2a? You can see that it covers all kinds of topics such as equipment, how to do the measurements, sources of noise like thermal expansion of the steel in tapes in the tank itself, what to do when installation is involved, and so on. But our focus today is just on one small part of 2.2a, the shell expansion caused by pressure head. Before getting into the ring slice method, let's talk about the expansion of the shell caused by pressure head. The wood boards are held together with bands or hoops. The hoop force provides the tension necessary to contain the liquid head. Even steel, like a rubber band, is elastic. This is a recent 150-foot diameter tank we analyzed with finite element analysis for a hydrostatic exemption. This type of analysis is a trade-off substituting advanced numerical analysis in place of a full water proof test or hydrostatic test. This tank has a maximum expansion of the radius of 3/4 of an inch, about 40 inches off the bottom. This is a section of Chapter 2.2a that a ring slice method would improve. This is an image from Chapter 2.2a showing how tape measures are used to strap the circumference. Technology is not just advancing, it's advancing at an ever-increasing rate. One technology particularly useful and important for tank calibration is laser scanning. As you can see, there are many technologies within the domain of distance measured by time of flight. Structured light scanners are the ones that are most used for tanks, and this is at the lower left block at the bottom. Note that to get measurement accuracies in the millimeter range, you have to have high frequencies in the gigahertz range. Here's a scan of a tank shell. The color contours show deviations from a perfectly fitted cylinder with high accuracies in all dimensions to within a millimeter or two. While one could manually attempt to measure the undulations in a tank bottom for the purpose of calibration, it is much more accurate to use laser scanning data. This type of calibration is often done by metering quantities of water and plotting the contour as the bottom fills in. Here's another scan of tanks. The top left is a scan taken from the outside, but the scans can be conducted on the inside of the tank as well, as shown by the bottom right. The difference between this and a photo is that the image has been colored and shaded to look like a picture, but it is in reality just a point cloud with millions of points where the position of each point in 3 space is accurately known. The point cloud can easily be rendered with color and texture to look like a photo, but contains distance information as well. The location of each point is known to within a millimeter. Finally, on to the ring slice method. This is a method that Dan Comstock encouraged me to pursue after I bounced the idea off of him. The basic idea is to take horizontal slices at 1 foot increments from the bottom to the top of the shell. The rings that result have no restraints on the top and bottom edges. In other words, the ring is pressurized and free to expand. The top and bottom of the tank are restrained to no radial movement, which is a good approximation of reality. Just to give you a flavor of what 2.2a looks like in this busy slide, it shows what calculations must be done. They are based on shell expansion, just like the ring slice method. The methodology and procedures are complex and confusing, and there are even some errors and inconsistencies in the example calculations. Above all, the technical basis for 2.2a shell expansion is not transparent from first principles. The idea of an algorithm is that it's a cookbook procedure where no one has to know or understand how it was developed or how it works, but it does work. The shell expansion part of 2.2a is definitely an algorithm. The ring slice method is also an algorithm, but it's very simple and clear, much more so than the 2.2a algorithm. It's also easy to see how it works. In data analysis, the gold standard is the benchmark, which is thought to be the very best way of checking models for accuracy. In our case, the gold standard is finite element analysis. With the ring slice method, we looked at a lot of cases covering tanks with these variables to make sure it worked across the spectrum of common parameters. Some of the variables are diameters, specific gravity, and mild steel represented by A36. The x-axis is radial deformation in inches. The y-axis is elevations for a 48-foot tall tank. The plot shows shell expansion for a 48-foot high tank with various diameters up to 300 feet. Note the shell expansion, which exceeds 1 inch for larger tanks. We had to compare 2.2a as well as the ring slice method to the, quote, truth, which would be the gold standard. Indeed, FEA is the gold standard for problems like this. Here we compare the ring slice method to the gold standard. The left plot shows radial deformations on the x-axis and the elevations on the y-axis. You can see how the radials are wavy. This is because there are thicker courses below the thinner upper courses that form curves between the two courses to preserve structural continuity. On the right is the ring slice expansion. Note that 1 foot above each course, we bring the expansion back to where it would be at the course below. This idea came from the so-called 1 foot method of API 650 and 653. Let's now turn to results. Chapter 2.2a and ring slice are compared to the gold standard. The left plot shows expansion volume with diameter. On the right, the relative error of the method is shown. The blue lines are the volume change computed per 2.2a. The gray lines are the ring slice volumes. The orange line is the gold standard. The largest deviation from the gold standard is about 50 barrels for a 300-foot tank, while the ring slice deviation is about half of that at 25 barrels. In the right panel view, the relative differences are shown in percent. Note how the ring slice is relatively constant error across the range of diameters and is more accurate than 2.2a except at the 150-foot diameter level. There are other findings such as how the expansion is occurring in the tank. 2.2a increases capacity as you move up the tank, and the opposite occurs in ring slice. FEA shows that the ring slice method more accurately reflects where the expansion is occurring. There are some other reasons why ring slice method should replace the 2.2a method. First, expansion due to specific gravity changes is precise and well defined in ring slice, which is not the case for 2.2a. Second, ring slice is consistent with what the FEA results are in terms of how much expansion is occurring in each course as the tank is filled. This just shows specific gravity expansion effects are presented in the ring slice method. For instance, the x-axis shows variation in volume while the y-axis shows change in specific gravity. There were lots of task group questions about how specific gravity affected the volume expansion. It turns out that it's very close to linear, which makes sense because hoop stress is linear with pressure, which is linear with specific gravity. This was not addressed in 2.2a except very crudely. The ring slice method explicitly gives volume expansion at any specific gravity. Here are some conclusions. Implementing it should make this part of 2.2a much more user-friendly, accurate, and understandable. This method is easy to implement in Excel spreadsheets and easy to understand. We have given the task group a demonstration spreadsheet that implements a method way back before COVID-19. Fortunately, we are going to talk about the ring slice method again this week. Thank you. I hope this was an interesting and informative example of how standards evolve with time. All of the standards are doing this all the time because of your efforts and expertise.